Daniel and Evelyn were on their way to visit Daniel's mother after getting engaged in Las Vegas, but disaster struck before they could share the news. When the traffic light ahead of them turned green, they eased into the intersection before a Miata suddenly appeared out of nowhere. With no time to react, Daniel's Tesla slammed into the Miata full force, sending it spinning before it came to a stop. Daniel later observed that had he been just a second earlier to move, the Miata would have T-boned his Tesla in the exact spot where Evelyn and their Yorkie were sitting. What a difference a second makes. Firefighters and police officers arrived within minutes, and both Daniel and Evelyn chose to be transported to the hospital to get checked out. The situation actually began a legal battle, but with everything now settled, Daniel's lawyer has given him permission to share his Teslacam footage with us. Of course, our viewers are smart enough to figure out who won the legal debate. After all, the Teslacam never lies. This might not be exactly how Daniel and Evelyn thought they'd kick off their engagement, but surviving a collision together has got to be some kind of sign. Of course, we're only getting started with this week's crazy crashes, so buckle up. Ray was driving his Model Y one evening in medium traffic. Visibility was good and everything seemed fine, but all of that would change in a moment. As Ray and other drivers approached an intersection with stop signs for cross traffic, a pickup driver suddenly ran his stop sign before smashing into multiple vehicles. Ray told us his Tesla applied the automatic emergency brakes before he had a chance to stomp on the brake pedal himself. He made a U-turn and called 911, and first responders arrived 10 to 15 minutes later. Ray gave responding police officers a copy of his Teslacam footage. He said the pickup driver appeared to be intoxicated, but he wasn't able to confirm that before leaving the scene. The Teslacam of Sean's Model Y captured one particularly crazy crash. He was headed to work and minding his own business when he suddenly heard a loud crack. When he checked his rearview mirror, he saw a vehicle stalled in the middle of the road and missing a bumper cover. He had no idea how serious the wreck had been until he reviewed his Teslacam footage later. That's when he realized another vehicle had rolled over. Sean had to get to work, but once he'd checked in with his boss, he returned to the collision scene and provided a copy of his footage to the California Highway Patrol. Paramedics transported the occupants of the rolled vehicle to the hospital, but Sean told us there weren't any serious injuries that he knows of. Marco was enjoying a relaxing drive in his Model 3, but as he approached a roundabout, all of that was about to change. When a scooter rider cut him off as he weaved between vehicles, Marco honked, which he says now was a big mistake. The scooter rider, gestured at him before passing another vehicle on the shoulder. Marco took the opportunity to speed up next to the rider, and that's when he really got triggered. Marco tried telling the rider he had 2 kids in the car with him and that the incident was being recorded by his Tesla cams. In spite of this warning, the rider kicked Marco's Tesla twice, prompting him to call the police while keeping a close eye on the raging rider. Eventually, he approached a roundabout where he waited for the rider to catch up to him, but he made an illegal U-turn and sped off instead. Marco easily chased after him before reading his license plate number to the emergency operator. He then continued on with his day. Marco told us this scooter rider was acting like a clown, but he definitely seemed to chicken out once Marco tried to confront him. What do you think Marco should do in this situation? This submitter was driving down a Polish highway with no idea that danger was rapidly approaching. The drivers of a VW Golf and a Porsche 911 were racing each other at around 120 miles per hour when the Porsche driver tried to overtake the Golf in the right lane, which is illegal in Poland, by the way. When the Porsche driver realized our submitter was occupying the right lane, he tried to swerve back into the left lane, causing him to lose control. The Porsche collided with the guardrail before the driver finally managed to wrestle his car back under control. He then sped off again, chasing after the Golf. Remember, never race on the highway. Not only does it put you in danger, but it also endangers everyone around you. This submitter calmly watched road rage unfold while driving his Tesla Model Y in South Carolina. Okay, it's a little difficult to see what happened, so let's break it down. The driver of a black sedan was tailgating an SUV, which was tailgating a Kia Soul. The Kia driver brake-checked the SUV driver, who slammed on their own brakes. This prompted the sedan driver to hit their brakes and lose control before slamming into the median barrier. The drivers of both the Kia Soul and the SUV then sped off, apparently continuing to road rage against each other. The car that spun out had some external customization, so we have to imagine this was more racing gone wrong. Thankfully, nobody was hurt in the incident, other than the one driver's ego, that is. Christopher was headed down the interstate between Seattle and Mercer Island on his way to work. Recent rainfall had left the roads slightly wet. Christopher was using full self-driving when traffic ahead prompted his Tesla to begin slowing down. Suddenly, he heard a vehicle behind him get rear-ended, then saw two wrecked vehicles in his rearview mirror. He didn't know if the collision involved any vehicles besides the two he'd seen, but then he noticed multiple other vehicles pulling over. With so many drivers stopping, Christopher decided to continue on his way to work. Braden was on his way home, but as he approached his house, a distracted driver blew past a stop sign. Braden's Model Y was T-boned on the driver's side, jamming his door shut and forcing him to climb out on the passenger side. Meanwhile, his smartwatch detected the collision and called 911 before alerting his family, who arrived less than 2 minutes later. Both vehicles were total losses and had to be towed away from the scene. Braden showed his Teslacam footage to the responding police, and they were shocked at how easy it made it for them to close their collision investigation. They cited the other driver for failing to stop at the stop sign and for driving without insurance. Braden was finishing up nursing school at the time, making this a very inconvenient time for him to have to pay his deductible and replace his car. Speaking of which, can you guess what he bought? That's right, a brand new Model Y. Brian was using full self-driving in his Model 3 while navigating heavy traffic. His Tesla automatically began decelerating to maintain a safe following distance from the slowing traffic ahead, when, all of a sudden, that wasn't just any bump, it was a Honda bump. Brian told us he heard tires screeching before the impact. Both drivers exchanged information. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, but Brian doesn't know how much repairs will cost. David was navigating to a restaurant when he decided to follow his son's Mustang left, ignoring his navigation that told him to turn right. Another driver turned from the opposite side of the road at the same time, almost resulting in a collision in the middle of the street. David told us he nearly had a heart attack, and it looks like the same was true of the other vehicle's passenger. Thankfully, no collision occurred, and everyone was able to continue without further incident. Scott was driving his Model Y in New York, where rain had left water all over the roads. After a Mercedes S-Class overtook him, it suddenly hydroplaned before crashing into a traffic light pole. The driver was able to get out of his Mercedes before Scott helped him get to a bench and out of the rain. Thankfully, police and firefighters responded quickly to the scene. Trey was taking his girlfriend to work in his Tesla Model 3. As he approached an intersection, the driver of a vehicle turning onto the interstate failed to yield to an oncoming truck. Trey stopped to help the involved drivers, but he wasn't able to help the driver of the truck move it off the road. The SUV driver responsible for the collision just sat on the side of the road, speechless. Trey told us the victim of the collision was an active-duty military service member who'd been on his way home after 3 days of non-stop field training. Trey provided copies of his Teslacam footage to the police, as well as to the victim of the wreck. He wanted to shout out his girlfriend Kate, who needed convincing that Teslacams are better than dashcams. The road raging never stops. This time, Marco captured a road rager while sitting in his Model 3 in Romania. The driver of a Dacia Duster blocked an Audi A6, prompting the driver to jump out of his car and punch the Dacia driver. Marco knew stopping would only block traffic and make it worse, so he kept going. Igor was driving his Model Y in heavy traffic on his way to work. With slow traffic filling the road, he was driving well below the speed limit when a truck driver, cut off by another vehicle, suddenly swerved into Igor's lane. Even though he slammed on his brakes, he couldn't avoid colliding with the truck. Evidently, the truck driver hadn't noticed what had happened as he drove off while Igor pulled over to call the police and check his Tesla for damage. After police reviewed his Teslacam footage, they found the trucker fully responsible. Fixing Igor's Model Y is estimated to cost $4,000 US. We've got more instant justice for you, and this one is long overdue. This emitter was driving his Model Y downtown in a 25-mile-per-hour zone when a pickup driver rolled coal on him. The pickup driver suddenly slammed on his brakes as he recognized a police SUV coming the other way. That wasn't enough to avoid the cops' attention, though. The officer promptly made a U-turn and pulled over the pickup for some instant justice. Owen was driving his Model 3 one night when an Audi S3 suddenly blew past him. The Audi driver cut across 3 lanes to make a right turn, but he was going way too fast and overshot the turn before colliding with an electrical box, taking out the traffic lights. Owen estimates the Audi hit the electrical box at around 40 miles per hour. He immediately used his Tesla to block traffic and protect the Audi driver before helping him out of the wreckage. Miraculously, the driver escaped injury, and 2 minutes later, police arrived at the scene before the Audi burst into flames. 4 minutes later, firefighters responded and extinguished the blaze. Greg was taking the Pacific Coast Highway on his way home from work when the highway began merging down into a single lane in each direction. Greg was following the pickup ahead of him at a safe distance and had just finished passing a slower vehicle in the right lane when a white Toyota SUV suddenly flew up next to him. The SUV driver used the shoulder to force their way in front of Greg, and he had to take evasive action to avoid getting sideswiped. Bryce was cruising down a highway in his Model 3 when he experienced a shocking close call. A black vehicle suddenly cut across multiple lanes without checking for traffic, coming very close to hitting Bryce's Tesla. Thankfully, he was able to avoid a collision, but that was too close for comfort. Remember, always use your mirrors to check for traffic before changing lanes. Sotos was waiting at a traffic light in his 6-month-old Model 3, but when the light turned green, the vehicle at the front of the line didn't move. Suddenly, a taxi right behind Sotos accelerated and rear-ended him. Both drivers pulled over on the side of the crowded street, and Sotos admits he was upset about his new car being wrecked. The taxi driver was apologetic, but he said a bad toothache had clouded his vision. In fact, he'd been on his way to the dentist. Thankfully, the taxi driver's insurance paid around $2,500 US to repair the damage to Sotos' Model 3. Ryan was driving his Model Y when he spotted a couple of Mustangs ahead, but he wasn't expecting what happened next. One of the Mustangs suddenly began shooting flames out of its exhaust pipes. I know it's a combustion vehicle, but that's just crazy.